Hi, I'm Brenda Lopez, and I am a licensed professional counselor and a registered play therapist. And I own Fort Bend Christian Counseling Center here in Rosenberg, Texas. We have several different counselors on our staff. We work with children, adults, couples, and teenagers. And we work with all different kinds of family issues and family problems and just things like that. One of the things that I want to talk about today is the importance of family in the life of someone who is contemplating suicide or has suicidal ideations. You know, as a human race, we are community-based people. We are people that need to have other people. And I know you have so many people out there that say, I don't, I'm an introvert. I don't need anybody else. I'm good by myself. And those people are few and far between, actually, because as a people, we are social and we need our community. And that becomes even more important when you have someone who is depressed and isolated and feeling hopeless. Having community and having family reach out to the person is extremely important. Supporting that person, surrounding them, letting know that they are cared for and that they are loved is extremely important. And it's probably one of the biggest factors in helping a person to survive thoughts of suicide and really deep depression. I'd like to talk a little bit about how you can support someone that is going through depression. And there's different things you can do depending on the situation. First of all, I'd like to talk about the don'ts, because a lot of the don'ts we typically do. And a lot of times we do those things out of love and compassion, but we don't realize the impact that it may have on someone who is contemplating suicide. So the don'ts. Don't leave that person alone. Don't isolate them. Don't give up on them. They need you. Don't talk about how selfish suicide is. A person that is in the depths of depression doesn't see any other options, and so they don't see it as selfish. And so that tends to add shame on top of feeling depressed. Don't compare their life with someone else's life. When a person is in the depths of depression, they can only see their life. Their life is what they experience. And so to compare it with someone else's life who may be worse than theirs really doesn't help a whole lot. Also, don't talk about all the things they have to live for. In the same way, it brings up a lot of shame and guilt when we list those things that a person has to live for. So those are the don'ts. And if you're thinking, I've done all those things, you are in good company, because most of us do. That's where we go most of the time. And that's okay. Don't feel bad about that, because all of that usually comes from a really good place. So now I'm going to tell you the do's so that next time you'll be equipped to help someone. And the do's are: make sure that you support them, contact them, reach out to them, even if that person doesn't respond to you. Reaching out and letting them know that you care and that you love them is extremely important. Also, you want to make sure that you invite them places and that you ask them what they need. That's a big thing. You don't want to say, do you need anything? Because that person probably doesn't know what they need. So you might want to ask, what can I do for you? How can I support you in this? Also, helping them find helping them find resources. Letting them know what the resources are in the community. There are counseling centers around, there are groups for depression, and there's lots of information out there to help a person that is struggling with this. And it helps to not feel like they're alone. Okay? like I said, we work with children also, and some of those things are a little bit different with children. So with children, we want to do a few different things. Parents, first of all, you have a little bit more control if a child is in your house. So you definitely want to make the home safe. You want to take a statement of suicide seriously with a child. Sometimes when we think, oh, they're just children, there's no way they can be thinking that way, it is extremely important to take it seriously. So first of all, you want to make your house safe. Make sure that a child doesn't have access to anything that they can hurt themselves with. The next thing is to reach out for help. Look at your community and see where is it you can get that help. If you need to talk with the schools, then talk with the schools. If you need to reach out to a counselor, then do that. However, you also want to be careful with who you reach out to and what you say. Children are very sensitive about their information being given to other people. So you want to make sure that you explain to your child that this is really important and that we need to get some help. Therefore, they'll know that you're going to need to talk with someone else. You need to be careful and not just talk with anybody, because a lot of times that will shut kids down and they won't want to talk anymore. It's really important for you to get the help you need as soon as you can. The last don't, I guess I bring up another don't. The last don't would be don't feel responsible. Don't feel responsible for making sure that person is okay. You can offer your help, you can offer your support, but it comes down to that person actually wanting that help and accepting it. And if they choose not to do that, then you're not responsible for that.
We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about how TM can help folks who are dealing with depression, with anxiety, with suicidal thoughts, with PTSD, with, who've been hit by the incredible pain that comes in life sometimes and can't imagine that they have a way out of that. And one of the great gifts of being able to teach TM is that we see those people come in here all the time and again and again and again find their way to a quiet, safe place. And the thing that's magical is not that, we do something magical, but rather there's already a place inside of people that's magical. This is the amazing thing about TM, is it's simply a set of operating instructions to find a place inside of you that is peaceful, that is quiet, that recharges your battery, that gives you some distance from the pain and the intensity of your problems, and lets you move back out into life again with more joy, with more energy, and with more clarity. And so this is the thing we see. And this is kind of a little bit metaphysical, but I'll just share a quote with you. The quote is, "We're not a single drop in a great ocean. We're a great ocean in a single drop." In other words, inside of us is a place that's already safe, that's already joyful, that's already quiet. It's not all of us. The truth of our depression, of our anxiety, of our despair is also a part of the truth. But there's another place, transcendence, in which those realities are no longer available. And to talk about this a little bit, we need to talk a little bit about the states of consciousness. We're familiar with the first three, waking, sleeping, and dreaming. But there's a fourth state of consciousness, transcendence. And again, this is not magical. This was first delineated in Science magazine in 1971, and basically it is the fourth state of consciousness. You already transcend. This is interesting too. You don't transcend a lot, probably, but you do transcend a little bit, because transcendence is the connective state between the time when you're going to sleep, going from waking to sleeping, from sleeping to dreaming, from dreaming back to sleeping, and sleeping to waking. So in the course of a night's sleep, you might get a minute or two of transcendence. Interestingly, the research shows that with a couple 20-minute sessions of TM, which is what adults do, you'll get about 20 times as much of that. And why is that so important? Well, as Paula Strong talked about just a little bit ago, What this does when we get to the state of transcendence is all the parts of the brain start to talk to one another in real time in a brainwave activity, alpha 1 brainwave activity, 8 to 10 cycles per second. And when all the parts talk to one another, it's kind of like a reboot for the brain. It would probably be a fairly simple way of saying that. Because not only do we get to a place where there's no thoughts, where there's no memories, and there's just kind of this wonderful sense of an awareness of awareness, but we also recharge the battery, and we also are in a place where we get a break from the intensity of life. So, someone who's depressed and may, feel like depression is never, ever going to stop, when they meditate, at least for a few minutes there's a little bit of a space there where that's not what's going on. There's a little bit of joy. There's a little bit of light. There's a little bit of quiet. And that is an incredible thing to have happen. So that. Now, another population we're dealing with right now where there's been a tremendous amount of PTSD, and it's one that we're really going to have a hard time dealing with because there's a lot of it, is the medical community. And we've already dealt with a number of doctors and nurses who are just absolutely overwhelmed. We have a program called Heal the Healers Now, which is through the David Lynch Foundation, which is intended to help doctors and nurses who've basically developed compound PTSD from, you can imagine what it would be like working in a ward where you're seeing maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of your patients a day dying of COVID. You can imagine how traumatic that would be again and again and again for a year at a time. So what we see with TM is that there's a dramatic reduction in burnout, a dramatic reduction in traumatic stress, and a dramatic increase in resilience. Now, this is a study with nurses. We see it with physicians, the same thing with reduced depression, reduced physical burnout, reduced insomnia. So we see these effects again and again and again. And how does this work? How can you, a simple little technique where you say a sound to yourself produce this effect? It basically sets us to a place, a level of consciousness where there are no words, where the body's quiet, we're not aware of external sounds. We may have a little bit of an awareness of awareness, just that part of us that watches what we're saying and interprets what we see and hears what we hear. So we get to what's called the default mode network of the brain, which is also where all the creativity and vitality and dynamism happen in the brain. So we get to that again and again and again when we practice TM. And it's not just about getting over things. It's also with TM, we dramatically increase our creativity, our flexibility, our fluency. People suddenly find that they start having those peak experiences more and more regularly. And one of the best ways of moving beyond depression and overwhelm is to start to have some successful emotional experiences, some powerful experiences, some experiences that point toward a future that actually has some possibility in it rather than one of just trying to avoid further pain. TM actually even produces, over time, for those who've been stressed out, dramatically enhances longevity. People who've been meditating for 7 years test out 12 years younger physiologically than people of the same age. So we see really, really dramatic effects with TM. If folks have an interest in learning more about TM, generally you can go to tm.org and you can find your local teacher. And we are a very large organization. We have about 200 centers in the United States, so if you're in any kind of a city of any size, there's probably going to be a TM center there, either permanently or at least on a part-time basis. We're in 97 countries. Once you learn TM, you're a member of the TM organization for life. You don't have to do anything with that, but there's always a sanctuary. There's always a quiet place that you can go to, and other folks who've learned that and are probably going to be fairly mellow and fairly easy to hang out with.
Hello, my husband Steve Corrick and I are really happy to be telling you about Transcendental Meditation today. My name is Paula Strong. I've been teaching Transcendental Meditation since 1977. And TM is you may or may not have heard of it, but it's a very simple and enjoyable meditation practice that's practiced for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. And during that time, the mind and body both get a state of very deep rest. How deep is the rest? Interestingly, in most regards, it's deeper than sleep. Oxygen consumption drops even more deeply than in deep sleep. Cortisol level and other stress hormones drop significantly. So the whole nervous system is gaining a state of deep rest. And if I had to distill it down to one thing that makes TM so effective, it would be this level of rest that we get. Because rest is a gift of nature to help us recover and rejuvenate and heal. And how deeply can it heal? It heals even the deepest stresses. Steve and I regularly have worked with veterans, first responders, so people that even have the deepest, hardest knots of stress. It can really be a valuable tool for them. And I myself, I didn't serve in Iraq or Afghanistan, but I did serve at 523 Dearborn Avenue in Missoula, Montana. And almost every Friday night, my siblings and I, when we would see my stepdad come home from a long week of work, and usually a few drinks under his belt, and things could get pretty intense with him and my mother. And we started referring to that weekly occurrence as Friday night at the fights. Well, I can kind of laugh at it now, but at 4, 5, and 6 years old, it was not funny at all. And it really deposited some significant emotional stress within me. And honestly, I don't know if I really would have ever overcome that if I hadn't stumbled across TM, Transcendental Meditation, when I was in college. And the stress manifests, the buildup of stress can manifest for different people differently. Some people might get high blood pressure. Somebody else might experience insomnia. For me, it was fatigue. I couldn't stay awake in class. I couldn't stay awake at night to do my studies. I was just weighted down with this incredible fatigue, which I think had been building over the years. And interestingly, this friend of mine who talked me into starting TM, he said it was a real energizer for him. And that was what got my attention, is that it was energizing, because I knew I had to find a way to deal with this fatigue. So it didn't take months or weeks, actually, after starting, for me to notice that I was feeling more energetic. It was just actually even less than a week. And the reason is because the level of rest is so deep that even the hardest knots of stress, whether they be deposited in the nervous system from being in combat or from being in combat in our growing up years, whatever, we've all had stressful situations. And most psychologists and physiologists, most scientists agree that stress is actually physiological deposits in the nervous system that are incurred through undue pressure of experience. What kind of experience? Any kind of experience. Emotional overloads, physical overloads, mental overloads. Any time when we're exposed to overloads, stress can be deposited in the system. But the beautiful thing is that deep, deep rest is so healing that even the hardest knots have a chance to start to unwind and get dissolved. And that's what I experienced. And it's interesting because in this simple meditation technique, it's not a guided thing that we're trying to control in any way. Well, let it go, let it go. No, it's not that at all. It's a very simple technique that we sit comfortably in a chair, close our eyes, start the practice, and the whole nervous system starts to respond in a very significant way. And I'll just give you a few details about that. During Transcendental Meditation, the mind and body both settle down to a state of deep rest. And we experience really the quietest level of awareness, which is referred to by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of this program, as transcendental consciousness. And each state of consciousness has its own physiological characteristics. And in Transcendental Meditation, the total functioning of brain gets enlivened. The mind naturally settles down, body naturally settles down. And one thing that we always refer to when we're talking about Transcendental Meditation is the ocean. Why do we talk about the ocean? Because our mind has a big range, just like the ocean does, active on the surface with the waves and quiet at the depth. And likewise, our awareness, we all know the active on the surface. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. Oh, I forgot to send that email. We know that busyness, but what we might not know so well, if at all, is the deeper, quieter levels of awareness. And this is what Transcendental Meditation allows us to experience, is an easy way to settle down. And it doesn't matter where someone is from in the world, what culture, what background. I think we've all desired to experience a little peace and quiet. My mom always used to say that. I just want a little peace and quiet for good reason. But so TM gives us a way to experience some peace and quiet, because in the transcending process, that active mind settles down to quieter and quieter levels of awareness in an effortless way.
I'm Dr. Arif Shoaib. I am the medical director at West Hospital. I see patients at the hospital as well as my private practice. At the hospital, I mainly see adult patients and some substance abuse patients and some adolescents. In my office, I see patients all the way from age 3 to 65. So it's a big range. I see all kinds of disorders. Now, ECT, as many people may know, it's Electroconvulsive Therapy. And it is usually reserved for patients who have not responded to medications. So a lot of the patients who have been on medication, they've tried several different medications, they're not responding, either the depression is not getting better, or they're severely manic, or patients who are in a catatonic state. Those patients respond really, really well to ECT. Contrary to what the general belief is, ECT actually is a very safe treatment. It's probably the safest treatment for patients who are pregnant and they have depression or they have bipolar disorder and they're not responding to medication. As you know, when patients are pregnant, the medications that you can give them, they're very limited. You can give them certain medications, not the other medications, because there's a fear that they can cause abnormalities in the fetus. And of course, nobody wants to take a chance. Not that we don't treat them with medication, we do. But ECT actually is safer in the sense that, other than short-acting anesthetic that the patient gets in order for them to receive ECT or muscle relaxant, really there are not many medications that they're getting, and not medications that are going to stay in their system. All the medications that we use, they are out of their system, within a few hours at the most. ECT, like I said, is an excellent modality. There's a lot of misconception, a lot of misinformation out there. There are certain groups politically motivated who don't like ECT and will talk against it or say how bad a treatment it is or how it can damage patients, but actually it's safer than a lot of the medications. If you think about medications that we have now, the mood stabilizers, the atypical antipsychotics, in a lot of the ways, they are very safe compared to the older medication we had. But, a lot of them have their own side effects. And metabolic syndrome is a common problem they all have, that we worry about. Patients gaining weight, developing diabetes, again, like I said, you have to pick and choose what's best for your patient, and sometimes you have to weigh the cost-benefit, analysis and look at what's better, and you end up using medications. But like I said, with ECT, you can actually get the patients, back towards normal. I don't want to say that they become normal right after ECT, but more towards normal. The acute phase, you can actually reduce that the period, the amount of time that they will be in acute phase actually can be shortened. For instance, I recently treated a patient, a very, very high functioning patient, who had their own practice and everything, and they got to a point where they couldn't function. So we tried different medications, and when they did not respond, we ended up, going to ECT. And once they got ECT, actually, they improved, to the point where they went back into their work and were able to, do their job. And I have to explain to the patient that, when you look at the side effect profile, some patients will develop some side effects. Most patients don't. And of course, we keep a close eye. I personally believe that you should talk to the patients on a regular basis. Ask them about side effects. There's certain side effects patients will not disclose to you unless you ask them. Good example is weight gain. A lot of times patients start gaining weight, they just stop taking medication. But if I ask them, hey, have you been gaining any weight? Have you noticed any changes in your weight? Then, they will share it with me, and then we can talk about, switching medicine, switching dose, doing something different where, we address their concern. Most of the patients do well in between 6 to 12 treatments. On rare occasion, we have to do more than that, but those usually are the patients that are like really, really seriously ill. In Texas, you cannot treat a patient that is under the age of 16, even 16 and is rather young. But, when you have nothing else available that is working, then, that's the best, again, treatment for the patient. You have to go by what's necessary for the patient, not what, what's available and what's not, right? So in this case, that was a pretty much last option. And the patient actually showed good response. She was able to stay at home because family was thinking about placing her somewhere else because of the danger she posed to the rest of the family because of her delusions and her hallucinations. She was able to remain at home and did pretty well. She actually finally moved out of the house. She lives with a roommate. Unfortunately, can't function in the sense of can't work because of her condition, but she went to school and has done quite well actually in school. So a lot of these patients actually, can benefit from getting ECT. But the problem, one problem that I personally see with this is that even amongst physicians, the knowledge about ECT is very limited. Not many doctors understand what ECT is. Not many doctors appreciate what ECT is and what it can do. Unfortunately, a lot of doctors, if they have not rotated through psychiatry, and not every psychiatry department has ECT, they will not even learn much about ECT. So if they don't know about it, and even if somebody asks them about it, they will probably, steer them away from a very potentially helpful treatment. With ECT, if you start ECT and you don't like the way you feel, you can stop ECT. There are not going to be any consequences from that. But for patients who are seriously ill, patients with severe depression, patients with psychosis, patients with mania, patients with catatonia, patients even with schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, we have treated those and they have shown good response. Again, if we can bring somebody from 0 to 7 or 8 level of functioning where they have been at 0 for a long time, I think that's a big achievement. I mean, you are saving somebody's life. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to call the hospital and we'll do whatever we can to help you. Thank you.
No, you can't understand what's going on with me. No, it doesn't make sense, but it's just how I am.